They called him the King of Celebration, a mogul who turned every room into a velvet rope fantasy and minted billions off the soundtrack of good times. Yet today, those same doors have swung shut behind federal marshals, and the party master himself is fighting for his freedom inside a Manhattan courtroom. How does a man who once rocked shiny suits beside Biggie Smalls now face accusations of running a shadow empire built on coercion, hush money, and late-night freak-offs no one was ever supposed to see? Stay with me, because the evidence spilling out under oath is turning hip-hop's flashiest success story into a cautionary saga, and the twist you're about to hear could change the music industry forever. The Empire vs. the Man. For 3 decades, Sean Diddy Combs seemed untouchable, an orbiting symbol of champagne excess whose every move, from marathon yacht parties to halftime shows, screams triumph. His business resume read like a mogul's wish list: multi-platinum records, a billion-dollar vodka partnership, a fashion label stamped with diamond logos, and a Forbes valuation that once nudged him past Jay-Z. Fans saw an eternal grin, Wall Street saw a diversification masterclass. But inside the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, prosecutors paint a jarringly different portrait: the glossy empire as a front for an alleged racketeering ring, an entourage recast as facilitators, and a man who, if the government is right, monetized secrecy as ruthlessly as he once monetized beats. Listen to the language already echoed in Week 6 of testimony: criminal enterprise, coercive control, transportation to engage in prostitution. These aren't the tepid phrases of a civil dispute. They carry the weight of mandatory minimum decades and asset forfeiture. And, for the first time in public, luxury credit card bills, private jet manifests, and late-night text chains are being stitched together to argue that the house Combs built was propped up by something far darker than savvy marketing. Yet, even amid these revelations, the courtroom feels like a battle of realities. Defense lawyers counter that the government is collapsing business travel and consensual adult relationships into a conspiracy theory ripped from tabloids. They point to a still loyal inner circle, chalking it all up to disgruntled ex-employees and scorned ex-partners. But one unavoidable truth hangs above both sides. The same charisma that once sold us an aspirational dream now doubles as the question of the hour. Was it all image, or was it camouflage? And if the brand was camouflage, when did the first tear in the fabric appear? Early whispers and NDAs, 2000 to 2022. Long before any federal indictment, industry gossip hinted that the velvet ropes sometimes concealed bruises, literal and reputational. Backstage crews muttered about sudden phone confiscations, party guests signed non-disclosure agreements thicker than some recording contracts, and hotel concierges learned to decode cryptic VIP requests. Extra towels could mean an overnight stay for an unlisted companion. Room refresh might cue security for a 4-figure cash drop. The stories rarely made headlines, but payouts did. TMZ would flash a grainy paparazzi shot, and within days, the subject's silence was secured by what insiders nicknamed a bad boy severance. Between 2010 and 2020 alone, at least a half-dozen incidents surfaced and then evaporated. A nightclub scuffle in Miami, an alleged backstage altercation at the BET Awards, whispers of a studio assistant fired and flown out after challenging instructions that crossed an ethical line. Most were buried under the familiar veneer of no comment, but the pattern was hard to ignore, especially for those who watched the entourage's shift, shrinking whenever rumors grew loud. Even Combs' inner circle began using euphemisms: hotel nights, debauchery, and the now infamous freak-offs. If the chatter is to be believed, these weren't casual after-parties. They were carefully orchestrated encounters involving NDAs, burner phones, and a rotating cast of escorts vetted like session musicians. Still, the machine kept humming. Each settlement was balanced by another Ciroc billboard, every hush-hush payout offset by a splashy gala or philanthropic pledge. To the public, Combs was a feel-good headline magnet, launching charter schools, paying surprise tuition for Howard University students, dancing through social media challenges with teenage energy. Behind the scenes, critics claim, those gestures doubled as crisis PR smokescreens. distracting from the confidential agreements piling up in legal offices from Los Angeles to New York. Yet none of those rumors, or even the occasional police report, shifted the ground quite like one relationship destined to test every secrecy clause the empire relied on. Because when Cassie Ventura finally spoke, the NDAs weren't just breached, they were obliterated. And with that breach, federal agents started mapping a paper trail no non-disclosure could erase. Cassie Ventura entered Diddy's life like the hook of an irresistible summer single, effortless, catchy, and soon everywhere he was. She was 21, he was already hip-hop royalty, and their on-again, off-again romance stretched from 2007 to 2018. Publicly, it looked glamorous. Red carpet struts, diamond vacation, surprise recording sessions. Privately, Cassie now says, it felt like living inside a velvet-lined cage. Court filings describe rules that shifted by the hour, who she could speak to, how long she could be out of his sight, even what she wore when stepping from a hotel elevator. The most explosive claim? That Diddy coerced her into multi-day freak-offs with male escorts, fueled by drugs and threats that any refusal would ruin her forever. Those words read like tabloid melodrama until you see the receipts. American Express bills for red-eye flights, $4,000 cash drops, and 5-star suites booked under the alias Frank Black. For years she stayed silent. Family worried, fans speculated, yet nothing pierced the fortress of NDAs. Then, on a chilly Thursday in November 2020, Cassie filed a civil suit so graphic the internet practically stalled loading the PDF. Within 24 hours, Diddy wired an eye-watering $20 million settlement and released a statement wishing her peace and healing. To outsiders, the speed looked like damage control. To federal investigators already circling, it looked like an invitation. Cassie's paperwork mapped hotels, escort agencies, even specific text threads. Suddenly, the whispers had timestamps. And while the ink on that payout was still drying, agents were busy triangulating the next move. Because Cassie's allegations didn't just describe abuse, they hinted at interstate crimes that no private check can erase. Little did either of them know a pair of battering rams was being prepped 2,500 miles away. Raids, arrest, and the RICO-style indictment. March 25, 2024 dawned like any other in Diddy's gated Los Angeles enclave. Until unmarked SUVs choked the cul-de-sac and federal agents streamed through iron gates with warrants thicker than a platinum plaque. Simultaneously, another team breached his Miami mansion. Helicopters tracked crates of hard drives, handwritten ledgers, and more than one locked phone destined for an FBI lab. By sunset, news choppers were looping the same shot. The king of celebration watching silently from a balcony as his empire got itemized, bagged, and logged. 6 months later, September 12, 2024, came the moment most fans never imagined. Diddy, in tailored streetwear, turning himself in on a 5-count indictment. The headline charge, racketeering conspiracy, pulled every allegation into one sweeping narrative. That for well over a decade he'd used staff, corporate shell entities, and a rotating cast of fixers to recruit, transport, and silence victims. 2 counts of sex trafficking detail women flown coast to coast for services, while a pair of lesser-known statutes on transportation for prostitution tack on extra possible decades. Prosecutors estimate potential penalties that read like a life sentence arithmetic problem. 20 years here, 15 there, plus mandatory minimums if the jury calls it trafficking. Assets connected to the alleged scheme, estates, cars, royalty streams are at risk of forfeiture under the same RICO blueprint once aimed at mafia dons. Defense attorneys scoffed that news extern. Next, inside the freak-offs, the footage, the coded texts, and the insiders now testifying against him. Inside the freak-offs, the footage, the codes, the paper trail. The gallery never saw the images, only the jurors did. But the hush that fell over the courtroom when prosecutors hit play told its own story. Grainy hotel suite videos from 2012 and 2014 flickered across private monitors. Sean Combs, Cassie Ventura, hired escorts, and an atmosphere less like a party and more like an endurance test. Investigators say the clips ran only a few seconds each, just long enough to link faces, dates, and locations to an ever-growing spreadsheet of receipts. In one still frame, a bellhop carts in a stack of Gatorade and chicken noodle soup, mundane items that suddenly feel sinister when you learn they were on a checklist for multi-day encounters that allowed no breaks for daylight or sleep. Text introduced alongside the footage fleshed out the logistics. March 18, 2016. Former Chief of Staff Christina Karam messages staff to set up a Midtown hotel room, water, cash, escort clearance. Minutes later, she requests $4,000 in small bills. Another thread from November 2022 shows Combs instructing 15 pills of Molly, don't text me about it, before a flight to Miami. And those $795.63 hotel charges, they weren't random splurges. Prosecutors say they marked nights coded as Frank Black, Diddy's alias, on corporate Amex statements. Defense lawyers argue the videos show nothing illegal, only consenting adults. But accusers, Cassie and Jane, describe a different reality. Forced participation, phones confiscated, threats that any refusal would end careers or leak private footage. It's that last threat, the promise of exposure, that prosecutors frame as a tool of control every bit as powerful as bodyguards or NDAs. When the lights came back on, the jury looked shell-shocked. The judge called a recess. And outside the courthouse, a new question began ricocheting through music industry boardrooms. If these are the clips we can't see, what does the government still have locked away? And the drama inside the courtroom was only matched by a sideshow no one saw coming, one that would put the jury itself under the microscope. Trial theater, jurors, race, and the Fifth Amendment showdown. Week 6 opened not with testimony, but with a curveball. Juror 6, a black male who had sat through 5 weeks of testimony, was abruptly dismissed after the judge flagged inconsistent answers about his residence. Defense counsel cried foul, warning of a racial optics disaster. Judge Arun Subramanian fired back that candor, not color, guides due process. An alternate, white mid-30s, slipped into the vacant seat and the trial lurched on, every eye now measuring how the new composition might tilt perceptions. Then came Brendan Paul, once a low-level employee who handled everything from party logistics to late-night cash runs. Paul shuffled to the stand and invoked the fifth before answer.